Chapter 386. You remember me? At the same time, Aaron calmly walked around the venue with a glass cup in his hand. His brows were locked into a tight frown as he looked at a small letter in his hand. The first thing he thought as he stared at the letter was, why would they give this to me? He was merely drinking and trying to make as many connections as possible when suddenly one of the elven workers handed him the letter. It was apparently from one of the higher-ups. Dwarven elders to be exact. Their comments were rather vague, but in short they wanted to arrange a meeting with him. What exactly do they want from me? Aaron wondered, taking a sip of his drink. Maybe they've heard about the product my guild is making. A sudden thought occurred to him. Lowering his head, he looked at his smartwatch. Tapping onto it, he looked through a series of files on his watch. Pig Nolan. Project Convention 467. Project Baiting. Project Rentalv. On his watch was a list. A list of projects that his guild was working on behind the scenes. Being the #1 guild in Lewington City, one of the 4 great cities, their guild invested in many side projects. This was just what guilds did. Staring at the list, Aaron's finger soon paused on a certain file. Project Alpha. Project Detail. Automated Machine. Time of Operation. 12 minutes 9 seconds. Capabilities. D rank. Licking his bottom lip, Aaron had a sudden look of enlightenment. They must be curious about this. He had been worried over nothing. The reason why the dwarves wanted to meet with him had to do with this. Project Alpha 1-2, one of their latest projects and something that they had been working on for over a decade. The project idea was simple: create an automated artifact that would act on its own and kill monsters without the need of sending actual heroes. Sort of like a golem. It was a project in which they had invested billions and billions of U. It was still in the testing phases, but without a doubt, it was something that would revolutionize the world once it got out. Most likely, one of the elders from his guild leaked the contents of the project to one of the dwarven elders in hope of catching their interest. I'm sure it's this. A smirk appeared on Aaron's lips. Folding the letter neatly, he quietly placed it inside of his pocket before heading for the back exit of the building. Even if it wasn't because of the project, Aaron wasn't suspicious of the contents of the latter. After all, he didn't think anyone would have the balls to plan something against him when he was so close to so many elites. His death would definitely be a sign of incompetency from them, as well as a declaration of war on the humans. According to the letter, I should have no problem exiting the building, Aaron light-heartedly thought as he followed the instructions written in the letter. It wasn't long before he arrived at the back door exit of the building where an elven guard stood. Standing with his back straight, the elven guard stared up ahead. An imposing presence emanating from his body. Rummaging through his pocket, Aaron showed the elf the letter. Here, I've been told to go out of this place. Lifting his head and staring at Aaron, the elf wordlessly took the letter in his hands and gave it a quick scan before giving it back. Clank. Following which, extending his hand, he opened the door for Aaron, who quietly got out. Throughout the whole exchange, the elf never spoke a single word to Aaron, but he didn't seem to care as he also didn't talk back to him and quietly exited the building. Once he got out, Aaron let out a long breath. He felt a lot more relaxed. Since the elf had taken his letter and accepted it, it must mean that the contents of it were legitimate. He no longer needed to worry about it being a sham. As he took a step outside of the building, a fresh nightly breeze brushed past him as his clothes and hair fluttered. Around him were a lot of trees, making it hard for him to see ahead. What next? Glancing around the place and only seeing trees, Aaron licked his lower lip. Taking out the letter and taking a good look at it, his head tilted sideways. Go straight. Okay. And so Aaron headed deeper into the forest. Not an inkling of worry was displayed on his face as he followed the directions indicated in the letter. Rustle. It was then that out of nowhere a rustling sound rang from next to him. Snapping his head in the direction of where the sound came from, Aaron saw the silhouette of a figure in the distance. Because it was dark, it was hard for Aaron to make out the features of the silhouette, but staring at its outline in the distance, Aaron could tell that it was not a dwarf. It was simply too tall to be a dwarf. But he was still not worried. With a relaxed tone, he called out for the figure. Hey, are you the guy that I'm supposed to meet? His tone was polite, but the narcissism and pride behind it could not be hidden. You're here to meet me, right? Lifting his head and staring at the greenery, he muttered. I'm not exactly sure as to why you want to meet me here, but here I am. Rustle, rustle. Once Aaron's words faded, the silhouette slowly walked forward, and Aaron, who was paying close attention to it, suddenly frowned. Doesn't he look like a human? He thought as his eyes squinted, trying to get a better look at the features of the silhouette. He wasn't as big as an orc, nor did he have pointy ears like an elf. The more he stared at the silhouette, the more Aaron was sure that it was a human. It didn't take long for the silhouette to come out from the bushes, as its features were soon revealed for Aaron to see. Brown hair, emerald-colored eyes, and rounded ears. As he had suspected, he was a human. Who are you? Aaron asked, the frown on his face deepening. An ominous feeling suddenly enshrouded him as the figure just stared at him without saying anything. Aaron's muscles tensed, readying himself for combat at any moment. Are you mute or something? Yes, I'm here to meet you. Cutting Aaron off, the figure suddenly spoke. His calm and collected voice echoed throughout the area around him. Listening to the words, Aaron finally calmed down and a smile returned to his face. Ah, I see. Good. You weren't speaking so. Midway through his sentence, Aaron suddenly stopped speaking. That was because the figure suddenly did something completely unexpected. Placing his hand on his face, the figure slowly clenched his hand and ripped something off of his face, revealing two distinctive blue-colored eyes that were as deep as the ocean. His black hair slowly fell onto his shoulders and a serene look appeared on his face. But the serene look did not last for long. What replaced it was a cold and indifferent one. Standing beneath a tree, half of his face was obscured. What's going on? He looks familiar. Blinking a couple of times trying to comprehend what was going on, Aaron tilted his head. It was then that the figure suddenly took a step forward and his face became clearer to see for Aaron as the moonlight shone directly onto his face. The moment Aaron was able to get a clear look at the figure, his body froze. Coldly looking at Aaron from the other side, the figure softly said, "You remember me? Fuck, where is he?" Kevin shouted in frustration. His voice was quite loud, gathering the attention of the people around him. Realizing what he had done, Kevin bowed slightly. Whew. Letting out a long breath, he lowered his head and walked away. He was walking in the direction of where he had last seen Ren. He only missed him for a split second. He was bound to be close, no? Ren. No. Blinking a couple of times, Kevin looked at the names of everyone present in hopes of finding Ren. But regardless of where he looked, he was unable to see Ren at all. Just where could he have gone? There's no way he made it that far. He should still be within my visible range. Kevin tiptoed to get a better look at what was ahead, but all he saw were an endless amount of people. How could I have missed him? He muttered out loud with a voice filled with frustration. Are you looking for Ren? Just when he was about to give up, he suddenly heard a calm voice from behind. Who? Startled, Kevin snapped in the direction of where the voice came from. Kevin's eyes soon paused on an old man who was looking at him with keen eyes. He appeared to look like a regular old man, but the moment Kevin observed him through the inspection skill, he felt an overbearing pressure bear down on him, prompting him to quickly turn off his skill. With a calm smile on his face, the old man opened his mouth. Are you Kevin? Swallowing a mouthful of saliva, Kevin nodded his head. Yes, I am. The old man looked familiar, but Kevin did not know where he had seen him before. He just remembered having faint recollections of seeing him before. He didn't know why, but as Kevin looked at the old man before, he felt that he had to answer him truthfully. Stroking his beard, the old man, who was none other than Douglas, opened his mouth. You're looking for Ren, aren't you? Oh. Kevin did not know what to say. How did the old man before him know what he was looking for? Was he somewhat related to Ren? Kevin nodded his head again. Yes. Over there. Douglas pointed towards the distance. His calm and serene voice gently traveled through Kevin's ears. If you're looking for Ren, he's gone through the back exit of the building. You don't need to worry about exiting. I've already told the guards that a group of humans will be going out. A group of humans? Kevin's head tightened. But before he could ask the old man more questions, a voice sounded from behind. Kevin. There you are. What are you guys doing here? It was Emma and the others. Everyone was here. What do you mean, what are we doing here? You were previously causing a scene. Leaning forward, Emma looked up at him. Worry flashed across her face. You okay? Ah, yes. Kevin took a step back and pushed Emma away slightly. Shaking his head and clearing his mind, Kevin remembered why he was here and turned his head to where the old man was previously standing. Huh. But the moment he turned his head, the old man that was previously there was long gone. Kevin, are you okay? Yeah, I think so. Absent-mindedly nodding his head, Kevin turned to stare in the direction of where the old man pointed at. I've got something to do. Something to do? Yeah. Without paying more attention to Emma, Kevin headed for the exit in the distance. Wait up. Emma followed after him. After her, Amanda also followed. She had a pensive look on her face, as though she had an idea of what was going on. Then after them it was Jean and Melissa. It wasn't long before they all arrived at the exit of the building where an elf stood. But before they could even say anything, the elf merely opened the door to let them out. C.I. Clike. Chapter 387. You remember me? A chill ran down Aaron's spine as he heard those words. Those indifferent and cold eyes, menacingly staring at him from a few meters away, and that familiar face. A face he thought he would never see again. Impossible, Aaron muttered, pointing in the direction of where the other person stood. His hands shook slightly, still unable to process what was happening before him. You should have been dead, he said out loud as he took a step back. How is possible? I've watched you die, you can't be alive. A crazed look flashed in his eyes as he recalled the day of the incident, around 3 years ago when he used his ability to swap with him. He saw him get engulfed by the flames. It should have been impossible for him to have survived that kind of impact. It was impossible. Why would I be dead? Run cocked his head to the side, unmoving from his spot. Why you? Aaron opened and closed his mouth multiple times, seemingly struggling to find the right words to say. But regardless of how much he wanted to speak, no words came out of his mouth. The shock was too much for him. For a brief moment of time his eyes just focused on the figure before him. The figure that should have been dead. I need to calm down. But the shock did not last for long as letting out a long breath, Aaron forced himself to calm down. He had been trained for incomprehensible situations such as these, and thus he knew best that he had to remain cool-headed. Losing his mind at the moment would not benefit him in the slightest. And so, lifting his head up and staring at Rin right in the eyes, he coldly muttered. I don't know how you are alive, but it doesn't matter. Turning his head and staring at the building in the distance, calmness returned to his face. You think you'll be fine if you do anything to me? You forget who is inside of that building. The edges of his lips curled upward. Confidence rose in his voice as he realized that Rin couldn't do anything to him. The situation was strange. For Rin to have been able to get some people to lead him here, he definitely must have asked a few favors, but that didn't really matter. He knew just how valuable his life was, and his death would only lead to his eventual death. Aaron clicked his tongue multiple times. Tisk tissy, you should have stayed dead. Now that I know that you're alive, I'll do anything within my power. Bang. With a loud bang, Aaron's vision suddenly went dark as he felt a tremendous impact on his head. The air was knocked out of his lungs and a forced sound escaped from his lips. Walk. An iron-like taste lingered inside the back of his mouth as his head throbbed. What happened? Aaron wondered to himself as his mind became clearer. Everything happened too fast for him to understand what had happened. It was only after his vision returned and he saw a large hand in front of him that he finally understood that he had been smacked against the ground. Get up. A cold voice entered his ears. Lifting his head up, he saw Rin standing a few meters away from him. His deep blue eyes locked onto him from the distance. Keith. Aaron gritted his teeth. I was just caught off guard. Had to be that. If he wasn't caught off guard, he would have never been taken down. How could he lose? Rin was someone that he had already defeated. Plus, he had not been slacking during the time the incident happened. He was miles stronger than most people his age. How could someone like Rin, whom he had already defeated in the past, manage to knock him down? He definitely just caught him off guard. Yes, it had to be that. Aaron repeatedly reassured himself. His confidence slowly rose back. With his hands behind him, Aaron slowly stood up. As he stood up, his eyes never left Rin, who was standing opposite him. It wasn't long before Aaron was once again standing. Taking a pair of daggers from his dimensional space, Aaron took a stance and Rin once again spoke. Come at me. Show me how much you've improved. Ren's posture seemed rather leisurely and his facial expression unchanging, seemingly treating this brief exchange as nothing worth his eyes. Is he looking down on me? Wiping the corner of his mouth, Aaron looked at his finger where he saw a smear of blood. His fists clenched into a fist. Then, without saying anything else, pressing his toes into the ground, he appeared right behind Ren. See if you can keep up with my speed. Twisting his torso, he swung his dagger towards Ren's temple area. His movement was so fast that it left afterimages behind. Swoosh. But just as the dagger was about to hit Ren in the temple, Ren's eyes flickered slightly and he leaned his head back. Huh. All Ren did was a simple movement, there was nothing special about it, but Aaron's attack, which was going at speeds faster than a bullet, shockingly missed completely. Landing in the grass, Aaron looked behind him where Ren stood. His eyes opened wide in shock. That's it. 2 words. Ren only said 2 meager words, yet when Aaron heard them, it felt as though 2 thunderbolts had struck his mind, sending him into a daze. How? Clenching his teeth, Aaron stared at Ren who was standing before him before he suddenly burst into a fit of laughter. A crazed look flashed in his eyes. Ah, fine. I'll show you something you won't be able to dodge. Pressing his foot onto the ground, a low bang sounded as Aaron jumped in the air. Then, as he was in mid-air, Aaron proceeded to twist his body into a spiral. His 2 cold daggers shone underneath the moonlight. It was then that his eyes locked on Ren and he smirked. Swap. Fwop. The mana inside of Aaron's body suddenly drained and his body disappeared, reappearing right in the spot Ren was standing. Following this, Ren appeared in the air where Aaron previously was. That's right, Aaron had just used the skill responsible for causing everything. Using the momentum he had accumulated from the spin, as soon as he reappeared, Aaron threw both daggers in his direction. Shoo. Like unstoppable missiles, the 2 daggers split the air apart with a low bang, breaking the sound barrier. The daggers then arrived before Ren in a matter of seconds. They were so fast that it was as though they had teleported before him. Hap. Letting out a low cry, Aaron forcefully stopped his body and planted both of his feet on the ground. Lifting his head, he stared at Ren. But, raising his hand, Ren merely grabbed the 2 daggers with his hands, from the sharp side as blood spilled from his hands. Then, with a low thud, he softly landed on the ground and threw the daggers away. Lifting his head, Ren looked at Aaron. Disappointing. He muttered. What? Aaron took a step back. How did he stop that? Aaron's mind blanked and his heart started to race uncontrollably. That attack he had just used was one of his strongest moves. Not many individuals could stop that move as the speed of the daggers were just too much for people to stop. He believed that when someone was at least in the Chapter 388 broken. Swoosh. A gentle wind blew past a forest as the leaves rustled. The gentle moonlight shone from above, creating a tranquil environment. Hey Kevin, hold up, where are you going? But the tranquility did not last for long as it was soon broken by multiple individuals who ran through the forest. To be more precise, it was 4 individuals chasing behind one individual, Kevin. Halting his steps, Kevin scanned the surroundings. He was so lost in his own thoughts that he had not noticed the others behind him. The old man told me to go out this way, but where is he? The forest was huge. So huge that Kevin estimated that it would take him a whole day to explore it. Finding Ren inside of the forest was like finding a needle in a haystack. Kevin. Suddenly, Kevin heard a voice coming from behind him. What followed after was the sound of rushed footsteps. Kevin slowly lifted his head. Coming over from behind a couple of trees were Emma, Amanda, Jean, and Melissa. They were all looking at him with weird faces. Huh. Caught off guard by the unexpected sight, Kevin stared at them with a dazed look. Then quickly recalling what he was here for, he spoke up. What are you guys doing here? That's the question we want to ask. Emma frustratingly said, walking up to him. Stopping a couple of feet away from him, she looked around the forest. You suddenly started acting weird out of nowhere. I called out for you multiple times but you never replied, so I followed you here. You followed me? Well, yeah. You had a very serious look on your face. I thought that something was up. Emma turned her head. You guys also followed for the same reason, right? Everyone silently nodded, clearly siding with Emma. Staring at them, Kevin scratched his head. He had been so focused on looking for Run that he had lost his composure and ended up worrying the others. Sorry, I didn't mean to startle you guys like that. Whatever. With a deep sigh, Emma rubbed her face and then looked at the moon in the sky. At least she doesn't look too pissed. Kevin sighed in relief. But then Emma frowned and glared at Kevin. Oi. What? You still haven't told me why you're here. Oh right. Kevin turned his head before he scratched the back of it. Not gonna say anything. You see, things are kind of complicated. Not satisfied with the answer, Emma's glare intensified. I think we deserve an explanation after you made us worried and caused a whole scene. Ugh. Kevin groaned. Lifting his head and staring at the others who were looking back at him, Kevin let out a deep sigh. How should I tell them that I was looking for Ren? Would they even believe him? Maybe Amanda, as she already knew, but what about the others? Ehew. Eventually he let out another sigh. He trusted everyone here, and so he didn't mind telling them about his skill inspection. Whether they believed him or not, it was up to them. Ha! But just as he was about to open his mouth, a muffled shout rang in the distance. Everyone's head snapped in the direction of where the sound came from. Then everyone exchanged glances with each other. What was, Kevin? Emmy tried to speak up, but before she could say anything, Kevin had already run off towards where the sound came from. Kevin, wait up. Staring at Kevin's disappearing back, Emma called out for him and rushed from behind. Amanda, Jean, and Melissa followed suit as their figures slowly disappeared into the forest. Not so far away from them, overlooking the forest from above, with his hands behind his back, Douglas stared into the distance. He appeared to have a solemn and pensive look on his face. Ha! With each scream that rang out, his brows would knit further. Should we interfere? Next to him, Waylon had a worried look on his face. Staring at Rin in the distance, from the way things were going, he could tell that something horrible was about to happen. Squinting his eyes, Douglas did not reply. HAA. Another scream rang out. Turning his head, Waylon urgently said. He's already lost control of his rationality. If we don't stop him now, he'll end up killing that kid. At all costs, they couldn't let Rin kill Aaron. The consequences of such actions were too detrimental for them. They had done this in hopes of helping Rin get over his mental demons, but from the looks of it, things may have backfired. Ha! I'm going. Unable to watch the scene any longer, Waylon decided to make his move. It would only take him a second to arrive at the scene, so he should have no problem stopping Ren. Wait. But before Waylon could act, extending his hand towards the right, Douglas stopped Waylon. What is the meaning of this? Waylon asked in frustration. Raising his hand, Douglas pointed towards a certain spot in the distance. Take a look over there. Skeptical, Waylon turned to look in the direction of where Douglas had pointed and his eyes opened. Looking at Douglas again, he muttered. You're not telling me. That's exactly what I'm telling you. Hiya. Aaron's scream rang out. His pained and agonized scream felt like a beautiful piece of music to my ears. I craved for more. You see, in order to not have my face revealed, I had to scar my face using this blade over here. Disappointment suddenly flashed through my eyes as I stared at the dagger in my hand. Unfortunately for you, I ran out of the poison long ago, or I would have used it. Taking out a small flask and removing the cap, I smeared the liquid inside of it all over my dagger. The liquid was pale yellow in color and was quite viscous, which was perfect as it stuck on the dagger quite well. Don't worry though. I've got the perfect replacement for it. Lowering my head and staring at Aaron, who was barely hanging on to life, my head tilted. Putting the dagger down, I took out a potion from my dimensional space. I spent quite a bit of money on this, so be grateful. Placing my hand on his chin, I opened his mouth and chugged the potion down his throat. Drink up. Agamich. Weak muffled noises escaped from his mouth as I shoved the potion down his throat. A horrified look manifested on his face as he flung his arms around. It was clear that he was trying to protest, but I didn't care. I just watched his body slowly start healing right before my eyes. Then once the burns on his face slowly disappeared, pressing Aaron onto the ground, I brought the knife closer to his face and traced it down his face. Kaha! Aaron screamed in agony as a long black scar traced down half of his handsome face. Ignoring his screams, I continued to cut his face. It hurts, doesn't it? I asked, tracing the dagger along his face, creating more and more scars. The more I traced the dagger on his face, the dizzier my head became. It was strange. It felt as though a part of me was slowly losing control. But I couldn't quite grasp what was happening. I was too immersed to care about anything else. Stop. Stop. Please. With the aid of the potion I had given Aaron previously, his voice slowly returned to him, and his words started to once again make sense. Once I heard his words, my hand suddenly came to a halt. I then lifted my head. Did you just say please? Instead of an answer, I was met with Aaron's rough breathing. Standing up and leaning my body forward to take a better look at him, I noticed that Aaron's eyes were not focused. They seemed rather dull. He already broke? Haha, of course he didn't break. I laughed. There was no way he could have broken with just this little pain. Come, I'll make you return to normal quickly. Getting on my knee, I once again fed Aaron with another potion. The injuries in his body healed at an even faster pace. I was satisfied. Let's continue. Taking out the dagger, I traced it along his face once again. Fresh blood dripped down from the side of his face. Why aren't you screaming? My face froze. Tracing my dagger along his face, I got no reaction from Aaron, who just looked up toward the sky with a blank look. My eyes became unfocused. Aaron. I called out, leaning my ear close to him. No. You can't break now. Grabbing Aaron's face, I shook it, trying to get a reaction out of him. But no matter how many times I tried to shake his face, he wouldn't respond. No. My heart froze. What he went through was not even remotely close to what I went through. For what he did to me, he did not suffer enough. Wake the fuck up, damn it. Spit flew from my mouth as I grabbed Aaron's head and repeatedly shook at him. But regardless of how much I tried to shake it, all I was met with was just a blank look. No. I shouted in the air. Standing up, I paced around. Bringing my hand towards my mouth, I bit my nails. This is not enough. He's useless. He needs to die. Yes, that's right. He needs to die. Since he can't suffer anymore, what's the point of keeping him alive? Turning my head, my eyes focused on Aaron on the ground. Kill him, a voice said inside of my head. I scratched the side of my face. My head throbbed. Biting my nails, my eyes continued to stare at Aaron on the ground. Kill him. The voice once again rang inside of my head. I scratched the left side of my face this time. Should I just kill him? And it wasn't long before the fake thoughts inside of my mind completely overtook my rationality, as the only thing I could think of right now was Aaron. The more I stared at him, the darker my thoughts became. He should die. He's useless. Why should I keep him? Just like he tried to kill me, I should kill him, no? Right. I took a step forward in the direction of where Aaron was. Then, walking all the way before Aaron, my footsteps came to a sudden halt. Lowering my body and getting to my knees, I extended my hand towards his throat, reaching out for it, wanting to grasp it. End him. Get rid of the one responsible for everything. Yes, he needs to die. My mind was blank. The only thought I could process was Aaron's death. I had long lost all sense of reason and rationality. My hand soon touched Aaron's throat. Feeling his warm skin, I blinked a couple of times before I slowly started to squeeze. Kill him. Die. With both hands on Aaron's neck, I squeezed as hard as I could, and Aaron's face slowly turned from pale to red to then blue. He was dying. Die. With each second that passed, the wider my eyes became. In anticipation of his eventual death. I suddenly felt this sudden rush of adrenaline. What are you doing, Ren? But just when I was about to completely kill Aaron, a familiar voice sounded from behind. With my hand still on Aaron's neck, my body froze completely. All thought processes inside of my head came to an abrupt halt. That voice. Turning my head slowly, my eyes soon paused on a few figures. The figures, I knew them. They were Kevin, Emma, Amanda, Melissa, and Jean. The people who I had seen for a very long time. A weird sound came out of my mouth as our eyes met. Chapter 389 Broken, 3. His hair may have been longer and his body was a lot more muscular, but the man before him was indeed Ren. Starting at Ren, Kevin did not know what to say and his feet came to a pause. Lowering his head, his eyes continued to look at Ren. 3 years. How long was it now? He did not know, it felt like a really long time. He changed so much. A chill ran down Kevin's spine as their eyes met. He felt this inexplicable sense of terror coming from Rin. Rin. Kevin softly muttered, his brows furrowing together. He's not in the right state of mind. Rin had this blank look on his face, one that seemed to be unable to properly comprehend the situation. Mounting Aaron from above, he had his hands pressed on his throat. A tense silence enshrouded the forest. Kevin wasn't dumb. He knew exactly what was going on. Rin was trying to kill Aaron. Rustle. A rustling sound suddenly came from behind Kevin. Turning around, he realized that it was Emma and the others. Walking out of the bushes, Emma squinted her eyes as she looked at Kevin. What's going on, H? What? It was then that she suddenly noticed something else. Turning her head, her eyes soon paused on Rin and her face froze. What? Out of pure instinct, she took a step back. Rustle. Behind her, Amanda, Jean, and Melissa also walked out, and when they noticed Emma's expression, they turned to look in the same direction as where she was looking at. Their faces froze too. Impossible. Emma muttered out loud, breaking the silence. Pointing her hand, which was trembling, in Ren's direction, her mouth opened and closed multiple times. What is he doing here? She turned her head and looked at Kevin. Her mouth trembling. Wasn't he supposed to be dead? Tell me I'm not seeing things? The presence he gave off scared her. It was this chilling presence that made her hair stand. It sort of reminded her of the time back in Hallberg, but this time it was a lot more extreme. The bloodlust exuding from out of his body felt suffocating. She wasn't the only one that felt this way, as Jean, Amanda, and Melissa all warily looked in Ren's direction. Something was off about him. What are you doing, Ren? Kevin softly said in a calm manner. He understood where Ren was coming from. He had read about the things that he had been going through and fully understood that at the moment he wasn't in his right state of mind. If possible, Kevin would have turned a blind eye to what was currently happening, but that was impossible. If Aaron died, horrible consequences could ensue. He couldn't allow Ren to kill Aaron. At least not today. Swallowing a mouthful of saliva, Kevin slowly approached Ren. Ren's me, Kevin. I'm sure you know who I am. Behind him, the others did not stop him. Worry and many other different emotions flashed across their eyes as they stared at Ren and Kevin. Especially Jean, who stood rooted on his spot like a statue. Shock dyeing his entire face. His mind was unable to comprehend the situation before him. Soon Kevin stopped in front of Ren. His eyes paused on the hand that was grabbing onto Aaron's neck. Ren let go of Aaron. His voice was soft, but everyone around him could hear it. You know you can't kill him. Think about the consequences that would happen once you kill him. It won't just be affecting you, but it will affect us too. His words seemed to have an effect on Ren, who slowly loosened the grip of his hand. Kevin sighed in relief once he saw this. A smile appeared on his face. That's good if why. But then Ren turned his head and his eyes interlocked with Kevin's. Are you trying to stop me? Ren's cold voice echoed throughout the forest. Kevin's face froze at his words. No, I'm not trying to stop you. Then why can't I kill him? I've already explained it. Tension slowly grew as Ren continued to stare at Kevin with a face devoid of any emotion and rationality. Explain what? Ren slowly stood up. Taking a step forward, he stopped right in front of Kevin. Their faces about 10 centimeters away from each other. Why are you stopping me from killing him? Do you know what I've gone through because of him? Ren's calm voice rang throughout the forest as his eyes became even more unfocused. Not backing down, Kevin nodded. I know exactly what you've been through. I've seen it in the book. Kevin wanted to add. But of course he couldn't say that. Would Ren even believe the fact that he could see his life through a book? You understand shit. Ren suddenly shouted out loud, grabbing his head with both hands. You don't understand anything. Yo. If you truly understood, then why are you stopping me? A heavy pressure suddenly released from Ren's body. The pressure was so powerful that Kevin was forced to take a step back. Ren, calm down. Shut up. Ren shouted, his eyes losing all semblance of reason. Kevin's heart sank when he saw this. It's too late. The current Ren could no longer be reasoned with. Ren, you really don't want to do this. Don't make me do this. Ignoring Kevin, Ren lowered his head and stared at Aaron. Then, pointing his finger at him, he raised his head and stared at everyone. Anyone that stops me from killing him will be my enemy. Ren, stop. It was then that a soft voice rang out. Taking a step forward, Amanda looked at Ren. Despite her face being cold, Kevin could see worry hidden within her eyes. "Please stop," she softly muttered, biting her lower lip. "I may not know what you've gone through, but I don't want you to suffer more." Her voice was quiet, but each word she said rang powerfully inside of Ren's head as his brows trembled slightly. Taking a step back, he muttered, "Why? You're also against me?" Sadness flashed across his eyes. "No. Fine, whatever. I don't care," he shouted. His face, which remained indifferent throughout the whole time, finally broke apart, revealing one riddled with many conflicting emotions. Clenching his fist and coating it with mana, Ren raised it and aimed it in Aaron's direction. A heavy bloodlust enshrouded the whole area. "I need to kill him, I need to kill him," he repeatedly muttered before he punched out. Bang! But before Ren's fist could even reach Aaron, his body shot in the opposite direction, crashing against the trees in the distance. Kevin clenched his teeth. You forced me. Haha, I see." Ren's laugh rang out throughout the forest. Standing up, he glared at Kevin. "So you decided to go against me?" "No." Bang! The ground beneath Ren suddenly broke apart and he reappeared right in front of Kevin. Fast, Kevin thought as he took a step back, dodging Ren's fist. But just as he had dodged his fist, he suddenly heard a paper-like sound coming from his right side. Bang! Before he knew it, he felt a tremendous force smash against the right side of his face as his head planted itself on the ground. Swoosh! Before Kevin's mind could even make out what was happening, a similar sound rang above his head and Kevin rolled over. Bang! From the corner of his eyes, Kevin saw Ren's fist smash against the hard ground, tearing it apart. Before Ren could follow up, with both hands behind his back, Kevin flexed his core and jumped up. Then, twisting his heel, he kicked toward Ren's heads. Bang! But just as his foot was about to land on Ren's head, raising his left hand, Kevin suddenly felt a powerful grip take hold of his shin. Raising his head, Kevin's eyes met with Ren and everything came to a sudden halt. "Is this it?" Disappointment clouded his face as he increased his grip. "Ugh!" Kevin let out a pained groan. Clenching his teeth, a red hue suddenly sprang forth from Kevin's body. Jumping up with his other leg, he twisted his body and kicked toward the other side of Ren's face. His movement was so smooth and fast that he left afterimages behind. Bang! But just like before, Ren grabbed his other leg, shocking Kevin. "How?" Clenching onto both of Kevin's legs, Ren coldly stared at Kevin. "You want to stop me with this much?" Then letting go of Kevin's feet, Ren raised his foot and kicked Kevin right in the middle of his chest with the sole of his foot. Bang! Like a broken kite, Kevin's body flew towards the other side of the forest, crashing against multiple trees. "Kevin!" Emma shouted in worry as she ran up to him. Cough, cough. Coughing multiple times, Kevin tasted a sweet sensation inside of his mind as he stared at Ren. He's strong. Although he had still not gone all out yet, Kevin could tell that the current Ren was extremely strong. In fact, he wasn't the only one that noticed this, as everyone around him shared the same feeling. "Oi, what do you think you're doing?" Of course, everyone but Emma took a step forward. Taking her eyes off of Ren, Kevin watched as Emma stood up and glared in Ren's direction. "You think you're some sort of tragic hero who thinks their whole world is against them?" She spoke out loud. Taking out her two short swords, Emma pointed them in Ren's direction. "I can tell that you've gone through a lot, and there are a lot of things that I want to say, but I can tell that you're not in your right mind. So, let me help you get your sanity back." Without further ado, Emma shot in Ren's direction. "Fuck Emma, don't. You're no match for him." But it was too late, as Emma had already neared Ren. Propping his body up with the aid of the tree, Kevin held the side of his chest and ran forward. Hop! Reappearing right in front of Ren and letting out a low cry, Emma slashed down with both her short swords. Something shocking suddenly happened. Raising his hands, Emma's short swords soon came into contact with Ren's hand and blood spilled on the ground. The whole area froze. "Why? You're crazy." A look of shock appeared on her face as she looked at Ren, who coldly looked back at her. Without saying anything, Ren pulled his head back and prepared to headbutt her. But before he could do that, Jean suddenly appeared from behind and aimed his dagger toward his back. He came so fast and unexpectedly that Ren was unable to react in time. Spurt! Blood spilled on the ground and Ren's face finally changed as he let go of Emma's short swords. Taking advantage of the moment, Emma distanced herself from Ren. Her face was pale. "We've still got a score to settle." Jin's cold words suddenly sounded as he removed the dagger off of Ren's back and took a couple steps back. Lowering his head and staring at the blood that was pouring down from his back, Ren lifted his head and stared at Jin, who was standing a couple of meters away from him. Without saying anything, extending his hand, a sword suddenly appeared in his hand. Gripping onto its grip, Ren suddenly pulled. A terrifying pressure exuded from his body. A clicking sound soon rang out. Hearing the clicking sound, Jin's eyes opened wide as he took a step back. An unprecedented sense of crisis flashed across his mind as he heard the sound. But before he could even react, he felt an inexplicable sharp pain in the right side of his shoulder. Following this, his body came tumbling down onto the ground. Just as his face was about to land on the ground, placing his other hand onto the ground, he pushed his body up in the air. Twisting his body, he softly landed on the ground. Grabbing onto his shoulder, Jin looked at his hand, which was soaked in blood. Then turning his head, he stared at Ren. An inexplicable seriousness flashed across his face. He, like Kevin, didn't go all out as he wanted to gauge his strength. But from this exchange, he and everyone present understood one thing. Ren was strong. Incredibly strong. Chapter 390 Broken. Had to take him before things got serious. Thud. Placing Aaron's body down on the ground, Waylon turned to face the distance. Next to him, with his head lowered, Douglas looked at the battered-up Aaron. Thanks to the potion that Ren had given him, the injuries that he had sustained from the torture were slowly healing up. But that was obviously not enough. His body may be healing, but his mind wasn't. Fortunately, Douglas came prepared. Bending down, he pushed a small pill inside of his mouth. "How is he?" "His mind is unstable, but he should be fine now. He'll probably be back to normal by tomorrow." Douglas stood up. Staring into the distance, he shook his head. "It looks like Ren was not wrong when he told us that he might lose himself today." They had already been warned by Ren beforehand that there was a chance that he might end up losing his mind. In case that happened, he wanted them to stop him. Everything that was currently happening had been planned out for the past week. Originally, Ren had been planning on taking care of his issues with Aaron after the conference. But after realizing that he might be unable to hold back whenever he saw him and potentially compromise his identity, he decided to just handle the situation on the get-go. Rather than hold up the pent-up feelings boiling inside of him, he wanted to finally let loose. Of course, this was granted that he wouldn't go too far. Fortunately, Douglas and Waylon were here. For him to go on a rampage like this, he must have been suffering quite a lot. Douglas deeply sighed. In the time that Douglas had met Ren, he had only occasionally seen him lose himself. But it was never on the same level as what he was displaying right now. Just how much had he been suppressing himself? It came as a small shock to him. "Yeah." Waylon replied with a solemn look, his eyes never leaving the area where Ren was. To be more precise, his eyes were currently locked onto a certain girl in the distance. "Emma," he muttered inside of his heart. A longing feeling swelled up from deep within it. "We don't have much time." Disrupting him out of his thoughts was Douglas, who glanced at his watch. "Gervas said that the elves have agreed to only give Ren 30 minutes. Should we stop them?" "No." Douglas shook his head. Interest flashed in his eyes as he looked into the distance. "Not yet. I want to see just how strong Ren has gotten. Of course, I also want to see just how strong the pupils Donna trained are. And I believe that Ren needs this to resolve some of the demons inside of his heart." Despite his words, he was still planning on keeping his promise to the elves. If either someone was about to die or the time was up, Douglas would appear and stop everything. He was strong enough to ensure everyone's safety. Lifting his head and taking his eyes away from his watch, Douglas softly muttered, "Now, let me see just how strong you guys are." Clank. A powerful wing gale spread apart as two swords intersected against each other. A metal ring lingered in the air for a brief moment of time. Separating from each other, Ren and Kevin stared at each other. Neither one spoke. Swoosh. Sensing something, Ren suddenly lowered his head and Jean appeared from above. Swinging his daggers horizontally. Lifting his head, Ren stomped his foot on the ground. With a loud bang, the ground beneath him tore apart and Ren shot up. His eyes flickered and Jin's movements suddenly started to slow down. Touching the sheath of his sword, he prepared to attack, but before he could do that, he suddenly felt a powerful force coming from Kevin's direction. Glancing from the corner of his eyes, Rin saw Kevin hold onto his broadsword with both hands. The surface of his broadsword pulsated repeatedly, as a faint destructive force lingered around it. The hue looked like a tall pillar that supported the whole sky. Following this, Jean suddenly hooked his arms around Ren, restraining him. "Do it!" Jean shouted in Kevin's direction. Nodding his head, Kevin muttered, "Sorry, Ren. This might hurt a bit." Taking a step forward, he soon appeared right in front of Ren. With his sword raised, he slashed down and terrifying pressure bore down on Ren. Clang. Restrained by Jean, Ren couldn't move. He could only watch as Kevin's attack slowly came at him. However, despite how dire the situation looked, he didn't panic. Staring at the incoming attack, his eyes suddenly turned dull gray, and a monumental pressure suddenly bore down on everyone present. Jin's grip loosened slightly and Kevin's attack faltered. Taking advantage of this, stomping his foot on the ground, Rin propelled his body backward. With Jin still behind him. Bang! Quack! Crashing against a tree, Jin spat a mouthful of blood as Rin turned around and punched out, hitting Jin right in the face. Following this, he quickly elbowed the side of his face, sending Jin into a daze. Buzz buzz. Right as he was about to follow up on his attack, a low buzz suddenly sounded from behind as Rin felt a frightening suction force. Grabbing onto the tree and pressing his feet onto the ground, till it cracked apart, Rin turned around. Rumble. A black light sphere formed at the top of Kevin's sword. The surrounding rocks and debris flew at incredible speed towards the black hole. White light wildly rotated as the very air started getting sucked into the black hole. This move was something that he had managed to grasp after mastering his 4-star sword art, Everlasting Sunset. It essentially allowed him to create a black hole that sucked everything inside of it and essentially restrained the movements of those that were subjected to it. Prick, prick. The tree that Rin was gripping bent as the roots detached themselves from the ground. A grave expression flashed across Ren's face. Grabbing onto the grip of his sword, a powerful hue suddenly sprang out from his body, enveloping the entire surroundings. "Don't forget I'm here." But right as Rin was gathering his mana, he suddenly heard Jin's cold voice. Bang! Before he could even react, he felt a powerful force hit him in the stomach and he lost grip of the tree. His body shot towards the black hole. As he flung backward, his indifferent eyes locked themselves onto Jin, sending chills down his body. Then twisting his body in the air till he came face to face with the black hole, Rin slowly pulled out his sword. A torrential amount of mana gathered toward him in a matter of seconds. Click. The fourth movement of the Keiki style. World Splitter. After reaching the essence realm of mastery of the Keiki style, Rin finally managed to grasp the fourth and second the last movement of the Keiki style. The World Splitter, a terrifying move that tore everything within a certain radius apart. A faint click sounded in the surroundings as a deep silence suddenly descended upon the world as the suction force in the air disappeared. Then, out of seemingly nowhere like a piece of paper, the black hole was suddenly dissected into multiple different pieces. Rumble. The ground tore apart, throwing dust and rock alike in the air like fast projectiles, and seismic quakes struck the place. Everyone lost their balance and fell to the ground. With their eyes wide open, horror flashed across them as they stared at Rin softly land on the ground with a low thud. Thud. Ha ha. With heavy breaths, Rin stumbled a couple of steps. Stabbing his sword onto the ground, he fell to one knee. Ha. A strange sound came out of Ren's mouth as he turned his head. Where is he? His head darted all over the place. Panic dyeing his face completely. Where is he? Where is he? He shouted out loud, completely forgetting his surroundings as he looked for Aaron's figure who had gone missing. No. Grabbing onto his head, Rin fell to both knees and screamed. No. 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 Digging his nails into his face till he bled, the screams soon disappeared. Lifting his head, his bloodshot eyes paused on Kevin and the others. Where is he? Wah. I said where is he? Standing up, Ren's chest moved up and down unevenly. As he walked, he stumbled on his steps. It was clear that he was tired, but despite this he continued to move forward. Tell me, where is H? Before he could finish speaking, a powerful force came from his right side. It was Jean. Raising his hand, Rin blocked the attack, but as he blocked the attack his right leg gave out and he fell back. Following Jin's example, Kevin dashed forward and attacked. After him was Emma, and soon Rin found himself attacked by everyone. Caw. Rin tried to react, but at the end of the day his mana reserve was limited. He was already at a numerical disadvantage, and with everyone attacking him from all sides, it wasn't long before he could no longer defend himself. Bang! Pushed back by a powerful impact, Rin skid back a couple of meters away. Ha-h. His rough breathing echoed throughout the quiet forest. Raising his head, his cold and indifferent blue eyes rippled slightly. Holding on to his right rib, Kevin stumbled forward. Rin, get back to your senses. He pleaded as he stared at Rin. But Rin shook his head. Where is he? Where did you hide H? His voice was rather weak. So weak that it made the others understand just how much pain he was going through. Shoo. It was then that a silver streak of light coursed through the air and directly smashed against Ren's chest, sending him crashing against a tree. Bang. Kua. An agonized scream rang out and Rin weakly fell to the ground. Supporting his body on all fours, Rin coughed up blood. Turning his head, his eyes paused on a long arrow. The very tip of it was blunt, but the force behind it was terrifying. At least 3 of his ribs were broken. Lifting his head, his eyes soon interlocked with Amanda, who had finally made her move. Why, you... He hatefully glared in the direction. Why? Biting her lips, Amanda lowered her head, hiding her expression behind her long hair. I'm sorry, she softly mumbled, lowering her bow. Hold him back. Following Amanda's words, Melissa nudged Jean and Kevin, who immediately dashed in Ren's direction and held him down on the ground. Let me go. Rin shouted out loud, trying his best to struggle out of Jin's and Kevin's hold. His spit flew everywhere as he screamed. Let me go. Hold still. Kevin and Jean may have sustained more injuries than him, but at the end of the day they were 2 people, and they were not as tired as Rin was as they effortlessly held him down on the ground. Look, see me go. Shut up. Arriving before Rin, Melissa squared down. Taking out a small flask from her dimensional space, she opened the lid, grabbed Rin by the cheeks and shoved them down his throat. Be a good boy and drink this. Despite Ren's attempts at not swallowing, lifting his head up, Melissa forced the drink down his throat, almost choking him multiple times. Once she saw that Rin had drunk the whole potion, she stood up and patted her hands. I guess I'm done for now. Clarity soon started to return in Ren's eyes as he stopped squirming around. Shocked by the development, Kevin raised his head and looked at Melissa. What did you give him? What do you think? Some sort of mind-cleansing potion? Close enough. I gave him a period tablet. Huh. Kidding. Turning around, Melissa caressed her slender neck. I just increased his serotonin levels. His mood should return to normal. I see. Pretending to understand her words, Kevin nodded his head. As long as it worked, he honestly did not care. Turning his head and staring at Rin, Kevin finally let go of his grip and stumbled back. But first against the ground. H. Breathing out loud, he fixed his eyes on the moon in the sky. I'm tired. He quietly muttered before a relaxed smile soon appeared on his face. Staring at Rin, who had finally calmed down, his shoulders relaxed. At last the fight had ended. Chapter 391, Broken. What happened to me? I don't quite remember. My mind was hazy and my body hurt all over. I breathed out and my eyes slowly opened up. The first thing I saw once I opened my eyes was the full moon hanging in the sky. Next to it were the millions of stars surrounding it. Beautiful, I thought. Alone in the sky, surrounded by many different stars, a deep sense of tranquility enshrouded my mind. You back to normal? It was faint, but I could hear a familiar voice next to my ears. I turned my head and my eyes soon paused on a figure. Leaning against a broken tree with his arm on his knee, Kevin looked at me. Looks like you've recovered. A faint smile hung on his face. It was then that fragments of memories started flooding my mind, and I was able to understand what had just happened. Without saying anything, I covered my face with my arm and proceeded to turn my head back to its previous position. I lost it. I knew that there was going to be a chance that I would lose myself when confronting Aaron. It was also because of this that I chose to handle the situation as quickly as possible. Rather than losing myself then in front of everyone in the union, I would have rather have lost myself alone, but why were they here? How could they suddenly show up out of nowhere? They weren't supposed to be here. They weren't supposed to see me in this state. Are you not going to say anything? Kevin's voice sounded once again. I wanted to say something. I wanted to tell him a lot of things, but the words just wouldn't come out of my mouth. We haven't seen each other for over 3 years. Everyone here thought you were dead, and the first time we see you again, you suddenly go into this crazy rampage. Kevin's words sounded calm. But as I laid on the ground with my eyes closed, I could feel the sadness hidden within his voice. Why is he sad? I wondered as my chest stung. Does he perhaps feel betrayed by what I did? Disillusioned that I was not the same Run that he previously knew? Maybe. Silence enveloped the surroundings. You really don't have anything to say? Kevin asked as he disrupted the silence. I shook my head. What did I have to say? Do I tell them that I'm broken? That the me that they used to know was no longer there? I don't know what to do. I somewhat know how you're feeling. His words made my brows furrow slightly. Moving my arm down, I peeked through the narrow gap. Letting out a deep sigh, Kevin lifted his head and stared at the moon in the sky. Ren, I've got many things that I want to say to you, but... Lowering his head, our eyes met. He smiled faintly. I'm just glad that you're okay. My lips trembled and my eyes started to hurt. Covering my eyes once again, I tried to hold myself back. But it was hard. What I've been through. The loneliness and pain I felt when I was suddenly thrown into the monolith. Just when I thought that things couldn't have been worse, I was forced to become a fugitive and had to escape the human domain. It was then that the loneliness inside of my heart increased. I started to realize that maybe, just maybe, the world was trying to tell me something. For more, visit emptynovel.com. You don't belong here. And maybe the world was right. At first I thought that it was just me. But with each passing day the idea started to take more and more semblance inside of my mind, until finally I thought, maybe I truly don't belong here. Once the idea sprouted, despite my many attempts at trying to not think about it, it continued to grow inside of my mind. It wasn't long before that was what I thought each night when I went to sleep. The times I thought of killing myself, trying to numb myself from the pain that I was undergoing each day. I thought that maybe I really didn't deserve to be here, but I'm just glad that you're okay. Those words. They were simple words, yet the moment Kevin said them, it felt as though someone stabbed me straight into the heart. His words pierced harder than a dagger ever could, and my emotions stirred once again. Say, are you crying? Kevin's voice sounded once again. This time it was a lot closer. Hey, are you really crying for what I said? My brows knit as I heard his voice. The previous emotions that I felt numbed down, and what replaced them was annoyance. You really did cry. Sensing the subtle teasing tone hidden within his voice, my mouth twitched. The annoyance within me grew even more, and before I knew it, my mouth opened. Fuck off. Huh. Did you just tell me to fuck off? I did. The tone of your voice pisses me off. Wah. You finally understand how I feel whenever I hear your voice. It was then that, cutting Kevin off, I heard another familiar voice. Without even seeing who spoke, I could tell who the voice belonged to. Melissa. Who other than her would ever say those words? I kind of already knew the feeling before. I replied back. You did. Yeah, after all, I used to talk to you. A brief moment of silence ensued after I said those words. Of course, the silence did not last for long, as I soon heard the sound of sleeves being pulled upwards. All right. Wait, Melissa, stop. Stop. Kevin's panicked voice sounded. I didn't even need to look to understand what was happening. Let me go, Kevin. As you can see, he's still not in the right state of mind. I need to give him an extra dosage. 1. No, he needs 10 more before he finally recover. Piff. Before I knew it, my stomach started to tingle and my mouth trembled. I suddenly burst out laughing. Ha! Oh, look great. He's completely lost it. Melissa's voice rang amidst my fit of laughter. Removing my arm away from my face and propping my body against a tree behind me, I finally got to see a closer look at everyone present. They had changed a lot. Compared to the last time I saw them, when they looked a lot more childish, the people in front of me had now fully matured. Finally letting go of Melissa, a relieved look appeared on Kevin's face as he said, I'm glad you're feeling better. I could feel the genuine relief in his voice as he said those words, and I smiled as a result. Ugh. But just as I was about to speak, I suddenly felt a sharp pain by the side of my chest. Lowering my head, I rubbed the area that was hurting. Rin, are you okay? I'm fine. Reassuring Kevin, I unbuttoned my shirt to get a closer look at my injuries. Taking off my shirt and taking a closer look at my body, my brows jumped up slightly. No wonder it hurts. A large blue bruise traced from the right side of my ribs to the bottom part of my chest. This was probably from Amanda's arrow. The memory was faint, but I could definitely tell that this was because of Amanda's last shot that hit me directly in the ribs. Touching it slightly, I flinched. Fuck, that hurts. Taking a potion from my dimensional space, I quickly chugged it down. Slowly, the wound started to heal and the pain slowly subsided. Once I took the potion, lifting my head, I noticed everyone staring at me. Surprise flashed across my face. What are you guys looking at? Raising his hand, Kevin pointed it towards my body. Rin, you. Oh right, I forgot. Realization suddenly dawned on me as I scratched the back of my head. Right, I'm currently shirtless. How careless of me. Grabbing my shirt, I put it back on. As I was putting it on, I tried to apologize to the others. Sorry, I completely forgot. Right as I was buttoning my shirt back, a hand grasped my wrist. Turning my head, I found Amanda next to me. Her eyes locked onto my body. What are you doing? I asked. But she promptly ignored me. Extending her hand, she took my shirt away. Oi. Startled by her sudden action, I looked up, but when I did, the words that were about to say became stuck. You. With an indifferent look, Amanda just stared at my body. At first, I found her behavior odd, but when I looked at her and looked into her black eyes, I could see a rare display of emotion hidden deep within them. I saw that same look before, but I just couldn't quite remember when. Standing up, Amanda turned her back against me, seemingly trying to hide her expression away from me and the others. Why is she reacting like that? I wondered to myself, staring at her back from where I was. Turning my head and seeing the others who displayed similar odd reactions, I looked down towards my body, and it was then that I finally realized why everyone was reacting so strangely. Without saying anything, grabbing my shirt, I quickly buttoned it up and stood up. Scratching the back of my head, I tried to play it off. Surprised by how much I've changed? Walking up to them, I shrugged my shoulders. Don't worry about those. I can get them removed anytime. They are nothing major. Please, stop lying. It was soft. Almost inaudible. But when I heard those words, my feet came to a sudden halt. Turning my head, I looked at Amanda, who still had her back turned on me. Her shoulders trembling a little. Biting my tongue, I forced a smile. It's fine. What you saw were just scars I got from my training. They aren't anything worth being Rin, stop. A hand pressed against my shoulder. It was Kevin. Shaking his head, Kevin had a complicated look on his face as he looked at me. I won't ask you to tell us what you've gone through, but, please, stop trying to pretend that you're all right when you're not. Stop pretending. Yes. Stop pretending to be someone you're not. Staring in Amanda's direction before turning to look at the others, I let out a long breath. Whew. Lifting my head, I stared at the sky. Stop pretending. When was the last time that I've done that? The last time I acted like my true self. Was there ever a time? Thinking about it, I have never ever been my true self. I always wore a mask to hide my real feelings. The reason why was obvious, no? As the leader of the group, I couldn't show them their weak side. Who would follow a broken leader? No one. Even with my parents, I had to pretend to be someone else, as I had taken the body of their real son. Even at the lock, I always pretended to be this weak extra and accepted the abuse from the others just so that I wouldn't have to expose myself. Was there ever a time when I did not pretend for once? Closing my eyes, memories flashed inside of my mind. From the happy times to the sad times, I started to recall everything. They say someone remembers their saddest moments more vividly than their happiest ones. It was only now that I finally understood what they meant. Out of all the memories that I tried to recall, most of them were made up with sad ones. You don't have to pretend to be someone you're not when you're with me. I won't judge you for that. Kevin's words powerfully rang inside of my mind as I opened my eyes again. H. Breathing out a couple of times, I tried to suppress the inner turmoil inside of my head before finally, mustering every little bit of strength inside of my body, I muttered. Please help me. Chapter 392 Reunion. They say that saying sorry was hard, But it was only now that I realized that asking for help was just as hard or perhaps even harder than apologizing. Please help me. Uttering those words, it felt as though I used up all of the strength inside of my body. I felt completely drained of energy. Almost as though I had sprinted a full marathon. Uneasiness swept my body and my heart beat faster. Yet despite feeling this way, the feeling I got after the initial lethargic sensation wasn't all too bad. I felt this sense of relief wash over my body. As though a heavy boulder had been lifted off of my shoulder, finally allowing me to stand up straight again. I couldn't quite explain it in words, but it just felt liberating. I deeply exhaled. It's okay. It was then that Kevin finally spoke. For more, visit emptynovel.com. Taking a step forward with his hand on my shoulder, he looked at the moon in the sky. I know that you've been through a lot over the past few years. I won't pretend to know just how much you've suffered and that I even understand what you're going through, but I want you to remember one thing. Kevin paused. With his eyes still directed onto the moon in the distance, he continued. Hard as things may be, you're not alone. It may look like you are, but all you have to do is look around you. Turning his head, Kevin looked at me before turning to look at the others who were also staring at me. And when I say take a look, I mean take a proper look. See just who is around you and see that there are people out there that actually care about you. Closing my eyes, I lowered my head. Guilt crept up inside of my heart. I understood that they cared about me, but the problem was not them, it was me. Ever since coming into this world, I've seen everyone as my pawn. People who I could move as I pleased for the sake of my final goal, defeating the Demon King. Be it Kevin, Douglas, Waylon, my mercenary group members, everyone was a piece in my eyes. A piece that I could move as I pleased. That was how it should have been, but recalling the words that Kevin had just said for the first time, I felt like maybe my mentality was wrong. Maybe I was looking at things in the wrong way, not just for my own goals but for myself as well. Perhaps without realizing it, the so-called pieces became more than pieces to me. It made me wonder, were these pieces really as expandable as I thought they were? Lifting my head and staring at everyone present, my eyes soon paused on Kevin and I finally opened my mouth. I think I understand somewhat, thank you. Thank you for making me understand my flaws. A smile appeared on Kevin's face as he removed his hand away from my shoulder. Turning his back on me, he muttered. I don't know when, but from the very first time I met you, I felt like there was this invisible wall that you erected on yourself. As though you wanted to get as far away from us as possible. It was quite odd, but I never questioned you. I feel like you're hiding something, but who doesn't? Everyone has got their own little secret that they can't tell the others. I get that, but... Swoosh. Turning around, a soft wind brushed past Kevin as his clothes fluttered. But it looks like whatever your secret is, it's eating away at you. My brows jumped at his words. Before I could say anything, Kevin raised his hands. Don't get me wrong, I'm not telling you to tell us what your secret is. I'm just saying if need help, we're here for you. Opening my mouth, I tried to reply to his words, but I struggled to find the right words to reply with. This world is a novel world and I'm the author. There was no way I could tell them this. Setting the fact that they would most probably not believe me, even if they did, I didn't want to make them feel like they were just some novel characters I wrote on a whim. I didn't want to let them think that all they've gone through in the past were just things that I had done in order to design their characters. There was no way I could tell them that and was never planning on telling them. Some things were just better off being unsaid. I smiled. I understand, thank you. You're doing it again. Kevin's voice sounded once again. Lifting my head, I was met with the sight of a frowning Kevin. Taken aback, I asked. Doing what? You're hiding your true feelings again. That smile you just did easily proved my earlier points. He shrugged his shoulders. But well, I can tell that it's hard for you, so I won't say anything else. Just keep in mind the words that I previously said. Then, cough. Just as I was about to thank Kevin for the nth time, I heard a faint cough come from behind me. Instantly, my head snapped in the direction of where the cough came from and my eyes soon paused on Douglas, who was standing not so far from where I was with a smile on his face. I wasn't the only one who was startled as Jean, Amanda, Kevin, and Melissa all drew out their weapons and stared at Douglas with wariness. Calm down, I'm on your side. Douglas chuckled at the sigh. Turning to face me, he alternated his gaze between me and Kevin before saying, Looks like you guys have sorted out your stuff. How about we head back? His calm voice echoed throughout the surroundings. Lowering his head and turning his wrist, he added, Time is almost up. The elves will be mad if we stay here any longer. You're the old man from before. Kevin suddenly said from behind me. Surprise flashed across my face as I heard his words. Alternating my gaze between Douglas and Kevin, I asked. You've already met? Yeah, he's the one that told me your location. He what? This time it was my turn to look surprised as I turned to look in Douglas's direction. My eyes instantly squinted. Cough. I think I made the right call. Covering his face with his fist and pretending to cough, Douglas calmly smiled. As you can see, all's well that ends well. You may have lost yourself a bit, but I can tell that some of the burdens in your heart have been resolved. Listening to Douglas's words, I secretly shook my head. So that's how it is. No wonder they were able to find me. It's because Douglas told them. Everything was starting to make sense. I had been wondering why they suddenly showed up out of nowhere while I was taking care of Aaron. The whole area around us should have been sealed, therefore for them to come, it shouldn't have made any sense. I merely shrugged it off before since my mind was too preoccupied with other things, but when I think about it now, it should have been impossible for them to enter. Staring at Douglas, it finally dawned on me. I finally realized how they were able to enter this area. Were you also the ones that took Aaron? Yes, we have. Douglas nodded. Nodding back, I stroked my chin before asking. Is he okay? He should still be fine. I sighed in relief at his words. Fortunately, I had asked Waylon and Douglas to back me up in case things went wrong. Already taking into consideration the possibility of possibly losing myself, I had asked Douglas and Waylon to be present for this very reason. So that I wouldn't do something I might end up regretting. Had Aaron died, things would have been terrible for me and the others. Not only that, it wouldn't have been enough to satiate the thirst for revenge that lingered inside of my mind. Just dying wasn't enough for me to be satisfied. He needed to suffer more. Once again checking his watch, Douglas's brows knit. Let's quickly head back. The ceremony is about to begin. Before turning around, raising his hand and pointing it at me, he said, Fix your shirt before we go. You're a mess. Right. Lowering my head and seeing the current state my clothes were in, a wry smile appeared on my life. Let me fix it now. Pulling my shirt down and tucking it inside of my pants, I slowly fixed up my buttons. Adjusting my shirt, I caught a glimpse of the scar on my body. I'm glad they only saw these scars. I thought to myself as I fixed my clothes. Had they seen how I looked after I left the monolith, I wondered just what types of faces they would have made. Well, the only thing that was scarred back then was my face, not my body. Body-wise, it was more about the burns as my body had been burned to a crisp. They do look pretty gruesome though. Looking back at the scars on my body, I could somehow sympathize with their reactions. The current scars that were on my body were merely scars I got from my training over the last few months in Henler. This was when I was fighting in the wild against random beast. I wasn't perfect. Despite my strength, there were times when my opponents were just too challenging and the scars just sort of accumulated. Since I didn't want to waste money on scar-removing potions or high-quality healing ones, I just kept them there. Didn't really care about how my body looked. In fact, there was still a huge scar on my shoulder from the time I wreaked havoc at the Inferno headquarters as well as from when I was fighting against the demons that were attacking the outer walls of Henler. You ready? Once I was done fixing my clothes, Douglas's voice sounded from the distance. Lifting my head and staring at everybody with a smile on my face, my foot gently pressed onto the ground and I followed after them. Yeah, I'm coming. He's strong. Heading back to the hall, Jean stared at Ren's back. As he did, it felt as though he was looking at an enormous mountain he couldn't see the peak of. Recalling his previous fight with Ren, Jean could feel the difference between the two of them. Not only was his rank higher than his, but the mastery of his sword art was even more refined than his. It was clear for him to see that there was still a huge gap between the two of them. Perhaps Ren was even stronger than Kevin, but he wasn't sure. Neither side ever went all out against each other. Clenching his fists rather than being angry, excitement coursed through Jin's body. He wasn't as close to Ren as Kevin was, but actually deep inside, even though he never showed it, he was grateful for Ren. Had it not been for him, he would have never realized his flaws. Ever since the Hallberg incident, Jean had set Ren as his goal. To wash away the humiliation he suffered back then, he wanted to beat Ren, but he never had the confidence in beating him. Just recalling the events that lead up to his loss, Jean felt this inexplicable difference between him and Ren. The same as what he was feeling now. Even then he never gave up and continued to set him as his goal. And just when he felt that he was strong enough to challenge Rin again, he suddenly died and the goal that he had been striving for suddenly crashed right before his eyes. With Rin no longer being there and no goal in mind, although Jean trained just as much as before, his rate of progress slowly stagnated. He had always regretted not fighting Rin. It was probably his biggest regret. And so, staring at his back from behind, the ambers inside of Jin's heart suddenly reignited and he clenched his fists tightly. Rin Dover. He was the man that he was today because of him, and he was also the man that he was determined to beat. Chapter 393 Reunion. Melissa found herself roaming the halls after separating from the others. Passing through a group of individuals, Melissa clenched her teeth and mumbled. What does he want from me now? Melissa has a strong urge to just turn around and leave the premise, but she knew that she could do nothing but listen to his words. To make matters worse, her current mood was not very stable. After what she had just witnessed, how could her mood still be stable? Although she knew that Rin was still alive, a part of her didn't really believe what Amanda had told her in the past. She was a pragmatic person. What she witnessed that day suggested to her that the probability of Rin surviving was almost impossible. As such, she only partially believed what Amanda said. Turns out she was right. Melissa quietly murmured. Who would have thought? He was actually still alive. One of the only people that can get on their nerves whenever they spoke. I swear I'm going to lose it one day. She shook her frustrations with a sigh, then quietly headed for a particular section of the hall where a large wooden door stood. This should be the place, right? Grabbing onto the doorknob, she slowly entered the room and closed the door behind her. Thigh clank. For more visit emptynovel.com. Who? But I sat down on a comfortable chair. My shoulders instantly relaxed. Because of what happened before, I was forced to change my clothes. Gritting my teeth, I extended my hand and grabbed a drink. My whole body was numb, and if not for the pills I took before, I would have been in extreme pain. You feeling okay? I was currently back inside the hall, which was crowded with people. From how everyone was still happily conversing, it was clear that no one had noticed what had happened outside. Sitting next to me with a drink in his hand, Kevin took a small sip. His eyes drew into half-moons as he took a sip of the drink. No, not really. Everything hurts. That's so. Kevin took another sip of his drink. Or at least tried to. Just when he was about to bring the tip of his glass near his mouth, Kevin's face suddenly crumbled and the drink in his hand shook, spilling onto the ground. Looks like you're also not okay. Taking a napkin to wipe away the liquid that had fallen on him, he eyed me from the side of his eye. And whose fault do you think that is? I shrugged. Your fault for being weak. What did you say? You heard me right. Your fault for being weak. I put down my drink. If I don't remember wrongly, I was kicking both you and Jean's ass. I may have lost in the end, but that was because I was fighting against 4 to 3 people at the same time. Of course, I knew that they were both holding back. Jean and Kevin were both really strong in their own right. It would have been weird if I was able to beat them both if they weren't holding back. I was holding back. Yeah, and I wasn't in the right state of mind. The edges of my lips curled upwards, and the faint sound of Kevin grinding his teeth rang next to me. Turning his head, Kevin's eyes turned into small slits. You sure know how to piss me off. He muttered with his teeth clenched tightly. Putting his cup down and taking off his blazer, Kevin stood up. How about you have another go at me? I'll show you that what you remember was wrong. I'm good. I lazily yawned before I exaggeratively pointed toward my rib cage area. I'm quite injured, you see. So painful. Glancing at Kevin, I raised my brow. You won't try fighting against someone who is injured, right? Ugh. A groan escaped from Kevin's mouth before he sat back down in a defeated manner. Seeing how deflated he was, I patted him on the shoulder. Don't worry, we will get a chance to fight again at the event. We won't have to hold back then. Buttoning the buttons of his blazers, Kevin grabbed a new drink and took a sip of it. You're right. I will hold myself back till then. Lifting his head, Kevin looked around. By the way, where are the others? Haven't seen them. How should I know? The first thing I did when arriving back into the hall was sit down. Kevin followed me after, but regarding the others, I really did not know what they were doing. May I have your attention? While Kevin and I were wondering about the whereabouts of the others, suddenly a melodious and peaceful voice sounded throughout the whole place and everyone stopped speaking. Turning our attention towards where the voice came from, a mesmerizing figure appeared in the distance. There were a lot of words that could have been used to describe how beautiful she looked, but I refrained from telling them as I was too mesmerized by her looks. Or rather, it was the sense of tranquility that enshrouded her body, seemingly trying to suck me in. The more I looked at her, the more entranced by her looks. But it was then that I suddenly felt a sharp pain by side of my ribs, right where I was injured. Groaning, I turned my head and realized that the pain came from Kevin elbowing me. With a solemn look on his face, he warned. "Careful." "Thanks." Snapping out of it, I lowered my head and thanked Kevin. Had it not been for his intervention, I would have remained dazed for a bit longer. The mana around her body is very pure. If your mind is weak, you might end up getting mesmerized by it, Kevin explained from the side, his eyes locked onto the figure in the distance. "Right." I nodded my head solemnly. Kevin was right. Because of the purity of the mana surrounding the figure in the distance, my mind fell into this weird daze. This was one of the features of pure-blooded elves. Definitely had to take note of this in the future. Normally I would have never fallen into such a situation, but it was clear that my current mind was still not very stable. Thank you all for coming here today. As most of you know, disrupting me out of my thoughts, the elves' crisp and melodious voices rang throughout the hall as everyone present their attention to her. At the same time, Emma sat down on a large red sofa. Curiously glancing around the room, she tried her best to remain composed. Right after they managed to calm Rin down, the old man that suddenly showed up in front of everyone brought her to this room. Although skeptical about his intentions, Emma immediately agreed. She had an inkling about what this was about. Thump, thump. The sound of her heartbeat was the only sound that Emma heard inside the room. With both arms on her legs, she sat up straight. Thigh clank. Her weight did not last for long as the door of the room soon opened. Appearing from the other side of the door was a middle-aged man with black hair and bushy brows. With an annoyed look, the middle-aged man entered the room and deeply sighed. "Sighed Douglas, the ceremony is already in full swing, why are you?" But halfway through his words, his feet came to a halt. Lifting his head, his eyes soon met Emma's and the room froze. Staring at the figure that she had not seen for a long time, Emma's lips trembled. Clenching her small fists tightly, she released the grip before clenching again. She repeated this several times as she tried to find the right words to say, but despite all of her attempts, her mind was currently blank. Mustering every little bit of courage inside of her, she muttered. Before long, her vision blustered and tears streamed down the side of her cheeks. "I've said." Well, that was boring. Leaning back on his chair, Kevin softly muttered. The speech lasted for over an hour. There was not a lot of important information in the speech, as the things that were said were things that most people already knew. Apart from the date of the tournament, which was in a week's time, the rest of the stuff that was said was just pleasantries. "You thought so too?" Standing up, Rin stretched my arms. Then looking around, he asked, "By the way, did you figure out where the others went?" "No, not really, but if I had to guess, Amanda and Jean had to leave because of guild-related stuff, and regarding Emma, I really am not too sure. She just told me that she had something to do." "Ah, right. I forgot you guys are no longer as free as you used to be." A look of melancholy appeared on Ren's face as he muttered those words. Staring at him from the side, Kevin understood how he felt. Having not seen everyone ever since their first year, it was understandable that he felt that way. He wasn't the only one that changed, everyone else changed too. They were no longer the same naive students from the past. "It's all right, you'll get used to it." Patting Rin on the shoulder, Kevin walked alongside Rin towards the exit of the building. The ceremony was still not over, but after what happened not too long ago, they decided to head back. Their bodies just couldn't keep up. But just as he was about to near the exit of the building, Kevin's feet came to an abrupt halt as he stared at the panel in front of him. Furrowing his brows and staring at the red message that had appeared in front of him, Kevin muttered. "Just what in the equals. Warning. 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 Time Remnant has set its eyes on you. Advice caution. Equals. This was not the first time that he had seen the message. In fact, he had been seeing this same exact message for quite a while now, but he just never understood it. Time Remnant. That was the only thing that caught his interest, but despite his many attempts at trying to figure out what it was, he was never able to figure out what it was. He did remember hearing about it in one of his visions, but that was all. "Something wrong?" Ren's voice rang from the side. "No, nothing." Kevin smiled. I should not get him involved in this. Whatever this time remnant was, it was definitely after him, and judging from how the person in his dreams seemed so wary of it, Kevin knew that this time remnant was something he had to be very careful of. Kevin didn't want to drag Ren into his problems. He had already gone through enough. Plus, what would he know about it?